What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Tune in to Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, and join the conversation about how to heal our broken system to reverse our current health crisis. The entire world is looking for answers, and the truth is hidden in plain sight. Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, when you can call in and ask the questions that matter most to you.
Hello and welcome to Awakened Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and today we are live on Dream Vision 7 Radio. And so today's topic is going to be the best detox strategies in 2024 for entrepreneurs. And so as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we're always looking for ways to keep the pipes clean, right? To keep all of the routes, the roads that lead to business success wide open and plentiful, right? And it's no different inside the body, right? We have our vascular system, we have our arteries and our veins, we have our lymph nodes, our organs that we want to keep as clean as possible so that fresh, nutritious blood and oxygen can get to every crack and crevice in our body. So that we have optimal body function, right? As above, so below, as below, so above, right? And so it's also the inside reflects on the outside. So if we want success in life, regardless of what we're doing, right? Regardless of whether we are retired and wanting to live our best life so that we're around for our grandkids, or whether we're brand new moms and we want to make sure we can keep up with our kids, or if we're business owners, single, whatever the case, right? We always want to make sure that we're fully present and that we can fully participate in everything that we do. And so keeping the pipes clean is extremely important, right? And as a holistic and integrative medical doctor, one of the very first questions people tend to ask me when they realize what I do is, should I detox? Should I do a cleanse, right? There's so much information and misinformation out on the interwebs that, it leaves people really confused. And it almost seems like everything you read sounds really good, right? And so you want to run out and do that thing, and then it either works or it fails miserably, right? And you might know several of your friends who did it, and it works great for them, and then you go and you do it and it wrecks you, right? And there's a reason for that, right? So if you are thinking about doing a cleanse or a detox to get the year off to a brand new start and to really get a nice, fresh, clean start to 2024, you'd better know your dynamic metabolic type before you make that decision, right? And the truth is, everybody needs to cleanse and detox. The trick is, how should you do it? So we all understand, yes, I have to keep my blood vessels open and clean. I don't want plaque forming in them. I don't want inflammation in my cells. We all understand that the detoxification process, the cleansing process, is what keeps those things clean and working optimally. What we get confused about is, how should I go about making sure that that actually happens, right? And that's where all the confusion comes in. That's where all of the trial and error, that's where all of the, crash and burns happen, right? So I can't count how many patients have come into my office after they've done a bunch of cleanses, a bunch of detoxes, because they just felt toxic, right? So they were correct in that they were feeling toxic, right? They understood that that was the message that their bodies were sending to them. What they didn't know is how to do it, right? And so we tend to link, I feel toxic, therefore I'm going to do a cleanse, or therefore I'm going to do a detox. We tend to link those automatically together. And then we go run out and we get a detoxification kit and we do the detox and we do the cleanse. And that can backfire on a lot of people. In fact, it would probably backfire on most people. And I'll say, especially biological females, right? We are genetically built differently than biological males, and our bodies simply don't function the same way. And so when it comes to doing a cleanse or a detox, we as women have to be very, very careful as to how we achieve that. So again, we know that we need to detox, we need to cleanse. It's part of the normal body function, but it's the how we should do it that really makes or breaks how you feel, how your body actually functions, and whether or not you have the ability to do the things that you want to do, right? So again, many patients are coming into my office and they've already done the cleanses, they've already done the detoxes, and they realize that they feel actually worse. So they felt toxic, they felt tired, right? Those two symptoms tend to go together a lot. They feel toxic and fatigued at the same time. And so the assumption is, let me go buy a cleanse or let me go do a detox. And then what happens is they feel worse, right? And eventually they ask for help, right? They might come into my office or any other integrative medical doctor's office or, any holistic practitioner. And universally, what we realize is they were not really meant to do an exterior cleanse. They were not really meant to go buy a cleanse and then force the body to use that to shove the toxins out, right? Why? Because they were too depleted when they did the cleanse, right? And so knowing your dynamic metabolic type is really critical to know, am I in a depleted state or am I in an excessive state, right? So Chinese medicine is deceptively, deceptively simple. When we first read about Chinese medicine, it tells us that it's all about the balance of yin and yang, right? And we think, oh, there's two things we have to figure out. And once we know those two things, we're golden, right? And it's when you start to really dive into Chinese medicine that you realize that it's so much more complex in a good way, in a way that it can describe and explain just about everything. So there isn't really a problem that we face that Chinese medicine can't explain. And it's through this simplicity, this deceptive simplicity, that we begin to unravel what Chinese medicine is and how powerful it is and how it can help us. So when we look at yin and we look at yang, they are broadly somewhat opposite, but they're not, right? They're very related to each other, and they can become each other, right? And so just like night becomes day, right? We think of night and day as two opposite things, but they literally become each other because it's a cyclical relationship, right? And so yin and yang is very much like that. And then when we begin to understand that there are a couple broad categories that if we understand them, we can determine our own metabolism. We can determine the state of our metabolism when we're experiencing a problem. And so if you feel toxic and fatigued, you need to broadly categorize yourself and know what your dynamic metabolic type is. And we'll go over how to do that today. Because if you are experiencing a depleted or a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you do not want to force your body to do a cleanse with an external cleanse or with a juicing cleanse or with, for example, a colonic cleanse, right? Because those things are understood to be draining. When we think about detoxes and cleanses, we understand that we're trying to drain something out of our bodies, right? We're trying to drain toxins and inflammation out of our bodies. And if we are already in a depleted state, right? So if you already have a deficient dynamic metabolic state and you're doing a cleanse, you are draining out your good energy, right? So you already don't have enough good energy. That's what a deficient dynamic metabolic type is by definition, is I don't have enough good energy. My metabolism's too low. And if you go and you do an external cleanse in that state, what you're doing is you're draining out the bad, right? The toxins, the inflammation, you're forcing them out. but you are doing it at the expense of your good energy that you already didn't have enough of. So now you've drained your good energy even more. What that does is that sets you up to get more and more toxins to just come in again, right? So it's our good energy that actually naturally detoxes us. So when we have a robust metabolism, right? When we have a revving, firing on all cylinders metabolism, our body detoxes and cleanses itself. We don't have to do anything from the outside to make that happen. It automatically happens, right? So when we feel toxic and we feel inflamed, it's because something on the inside is not capable of doing it on its own, right? And so we have to determine, well, is that something that I'm too depleted? And so I'm missing the things that my body would use to cleanse and detox itself all by itself. That's a deficient dynamic metabolic type. Or am I excessive, right? And an excessive dynamic metabolic type means you don't necessarily have a deficient metabolism, you have a normal metabolism, but there's a bunch of stuff piled on top of it that is giving you excessive energy. And we can broadly categorize that energy as good or bad, right? So a good revving metabolism is good, that's a good thing. The bad energy is in the form of toxins and inflammation on top of that good metabolism. So when we see that, the body is toxic because there's something in it that doesn't belong in it. So we can understand, like, okay, it's not that I'm depleted. It's not that I'm missing things that I need. It's that there's stuff in my body that doesn't belong there. And that's clogging up the mechanism that would allow my body to detox itself. Right? And so those are the two broad dynamic metabolic types that we need to figure out right off the bat. Am I deficient or am I excessive? Now, if you are deficient and depleted, you do not want to do an external cleanse. What you want to do is you want to fix what's depleted. What's missing? Vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, proteins, fats, right? These are the ingredients that our bodies require to do all of its functions, right? So to see, to walk, to breathe, to detox, to reproduce, to digest, to move, to do all of these things, I require vitamins, minerals, hormones, antioxidants, proteins, fats, right? And if you are in a deficient dynamic metabolic state, what you're saying is I'm missing any number of those things. Right. And I have to fix those things so that my body can cleanse itself. And so that's how you can begin to understand, like, okay, if I'm depleted, I have to fill in the blanks. I have to fill in what's been missing and then allow my body to then detox itself. Right. So your body will get rid of those toxins and that inflammation once your metabolism is back up to near normal. It will automatically start to cleanse and detox you by itself, and you don't need to do an actual cleanse. And in fact, if you do a cleanse, you're going to harm yourself, right? So you want to make sure I filled in all my blanks. Now I'm going to allow my body to detox itself. If you are the opposite dynamic metabolic type, right? If you have an excessive dynamic metabolic type, now you can look at different detoxification strategies from the outside in. Now you can look at doing a liver cleanse. You can look at doing a gut cleanse. You can look at perhaps a colonic, even intermittent fasting, right? So everything that we do has an energy to it. So it's either restoring and building us up, or it's draining us out, right? So cleanses, we can understand it's draining me out. We can understand that a colonic, even though we can put certain things in the colonic to be absorbed through the gut, it still has an overall draining me out type of energy. Even acupuncture has an overall draining me out energy because we're forcing blood and oxygen to move to different places where we're strategically putting needles in the body. So we're forcing things to move. That's generally a draining type of a process. Now, certain things are more draining than other things, right? Even things where we're sweating out. So a sauna is putting heat into my body, but it's also sweating out things, right? Which we hope is toxins and inflammation. So everything has an energy about it. Even the foods that we eat have an energy about it. Fasting has an energy about it, right? So when we fast, we are not putting things in the body. We are not restoring the body. We're actually draining the body out because we're not putting calories in it, right? And so that allows the body to drain things out. Even a vegan diet is draining by its nature. So even though we're putting food in the body, because those foods have a certain energy to them, they're going to drain out inflammation and drain out toxins. So there's a way that we can begin to understand, okay, if I have an excessive dynamic metabolic type, there are strategies I can employ that will drain out those toxins and that inflammation in a way that will be optimal for me, right? And so if you are of an excessive dynamic metabolic type, then you want to do a guided detoxification program because you're going to want to purposefully drain from the outside in those toxins and that inflammation under guidance, because you need to know how much of my good energy is being used to achieve this, right? There's a way that you can over cleanse, over drain yourself, over detox yourself. So you may start out with a robust, really good metabolism, but if you're doing excessive detoxes and cleanses, you're using up your good energy each time you do that. And if you don't replenish that good energy in a very strategic way, eventually you're going to drain out your good energy too, and then it's going to backfire on you. We see this in women with intermittent fasting, right? When they first start to do it, it feels great, right? They're draining out all that inflammation, all those toxins. And then eventually, as they're draining out their good energy too, they hit a wall and the fasting doesn't work anymore, or they feel bad doing the fasting, right? That's your first sign that you've dug too much into your good energy and that you need to flip things around, right? And so I think we had a couple questions, is it? How do I know for sure that I'm toxic? That's a question. How do I know for sure that I'm toxic? So you can do our our burnout assessment on awakenedwellnessnow.com. You can download it and do it. It's 5 simple questions that you ask yourself, right? And you can just go right through the burnout assessment. It asks you the 5 questions, and then you're going to fall into a bucket, right, at the end. And you're going to fall into one of 6 buckets, right? You're going to either be a deficient dynamic metabolic type or an excessive dynamic metabolic type. Within the deficient category, we have 3 different types of what we call temperatures. Temperature really matters in Chinese medicine and in our body's physiology and in our metabolism. Whether we're too hot matters, whether we're too cold matters, and whether we're temperature neutral. So that means you're not too hot or too cold. You have an even perception of temperature. Those are the 3 broad categories in the deficient. So in other words, we have a hot deficient dynamic metabolic type. You could be a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type, and you can be a temperature neutral deficient dynamic metabolic type. If you fall into any of those 3, it's not that you're actually toxic. It's that you are actually depleted. And that's causing you to think that you're toxic, because you're going to have the same feeling whether you're too depleted or you're toxic. And so in order to understand, why am I feeling toxic? Is it because I'm depleted, or am I really actually toxic? You can do this burnout assessment. If you fall into the deficient category, you're not actually toxic, you're depleted. And so we have little tips on the burnout assessment to help you really get started in filling those gaps in, so that your body can then raise its metabolism, and then it'll just take out whatever inflammation and toxins might be there. So we all have some level of toxins and inflammation in the body. The question is it significant enough that I need to do an actual cleanse, or is it that I'm so depleted that I feel the toxins, and it's not that they're that significant, it's that I'm that much more depleted, right? And so if you fall into those 3 categories in the deficient type, do not do a cleanse or a detox. If you fall into the other buckets, if you are an excess dynamic metabolic type, whether it's hot excess, cold excess or temperature neutral excess, that means you're toxic. That means you're inflamed. And what we mean by excess, again, it's not that you have excess metabolism, right? It's not that your metabolism is going at 110, 120%. It can only go at 100%. Can't go it can't go above that. So whatever's above that, that's where the toxins and the inflammation are coming in. So how do you know if you're excess, right? One of the questions is, people are often tired when they're toxic. So that's question number one, is you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how much energy you have. And then the next question is, you ask yourself, does that number go up or down if I move? If I get up and I move, if I go work out, if I walk around the block, if I just stand up and do jumping jacks, do I feel better or do I feel worse? If you answer that question as, I feel better when I move, so when you move, what you're doing is you're mobilizing your body's detoxification systems, your natural ones, to get rid of toxins and inflammation. So if you feel better when you move, that's a really good indication that you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, and that excess is in the form of toxins and inflammation. Then we have some tips in our burnout assessment to help you to mobilize those toxins, to get rid of those toxins. Another question you ask yourself is, do I feel better or worse if I sit still? People that are toxic and inflamed usually feel worse if they sit still. People who are deficient feel better if they sit still, right? So if I'm depleted and I'm not burning any calories because I'm just sitting still and breathing, I'm going to feel better than if I have to force myself to move, right? If I have to go and do a class that I signed up for, I don't know, a Zumba class or something, or a cycling class, right? If I have to go and do that class and I feel worse after I do that class, that's telling me I was too depleted to have done that class, right? I forced myself to move when I didn't have the energy to move, and now I'm paying for it. That's a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So there's two other questions, that you would ask yourself to really nail down your dynamic metabolic type. So I encourage you to do the burnout assessment to complete that, so you know exactly what category you fall in. But the last question is, do I feel hot compared to most other people? Do I feel cold compared to most other people? Or do I feel neutral? Do I not feel hot or cold? Right? And you have to compare it to most other people. Don't compare it to your partner, or to one of your children or something like that, because you don't know what they are. You don't know what their dynamic metabolic type is. So you want to compare yourself to more than one person, right? If you're the only one in your group of friends who's always got the sweater on, who's always got the jacket on, and you're always complaining it's too cold, and nobody knows what you're talking about, then you are a cold dynamic metabolic type, right? So if you ended up in the deficient category and you're always cold, then you know that you are a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type. And so how you improve your detoxification system is to warm up your system, because if you're too cold, you do the opposite in Chinese medicine, right? So people who are too cold want to warm themselves up. That means you want to eat things that are warm, a little bit spicy. You want to keep yourself warm, right? You don't want to be in cold environments all the time. You would benefit from an infrared sauna, right? The high temperatures are going to be good for you because you're too cold. So you want to raise your temperature, your perception of temperature, to make it neutral again. That will automatically improve your detoxification systems, because when things are too cold, they're sluggish. They don't move. When things are too hot, they're also sluggish, because now you're too acidic, and that acidity creates sluggishness in the system, right? So if you are hot all the time, like, again, you're the one that's always ripping your clothes off and all your friends are like, it's not hot in here, what's the matter with you? Or you're always duking it out with your family members to turn on the air conditioner and none of them are hot, then you are a hot deficient dynamic metabolic type. And now you want to do the opposite. You need to cool yourself down. Cooling foods tend to be alkaline. So this is why a vegan diet might be beneficial, to cool the system down. So you want to feel neutral. You don't want to feel too hot or too cold. That's when you know you've done enough, right? And then if you're temperature neutral, then you want to balance that. You don't want to have things that are excessively spicy for too long. And then you don't want to have things that are excessively cooling, like alkaline foods or a vegan diet for too long. You want to stay in the middle. And we talk about that in the burnout assessment. We give you some really good tips there to help you to know, like, what foods would I eat if I were a neutral dynamic metabolic type, as opposed to if I'm cold or hot, right? And how should I eat? So if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you actually need to have small, frequent meals throughout the day, because you need to build your metabolism throughout the day, right? You don't want to fast if you're deficient. Now, if you're excessive dynamic metabolic type, whether it's cold, hot, or temperature neutral, you could fast, because now you're going to drain out that quote unquote bad energy in the form of toxins and inflammation. But what you would use to do that depends on the temperature. Same thing, if you're a cold excess, you want things that are warming. You still want to raise your body temperature while you're cleansing, while you're draining out that bad energy. And again, we do have tips in our burnout assessment to help you to figure out, like, how do I do that, right? Same thing if you're hot excess. If you're hot excess, a vegan diet is really good for that, because vegan diets will cool you down because they tend to be alkaline. Alkaline foods tend to drop your body temperature, right? They tend to reduce acidity. And so acids are hot, so acids will kind of raise the body temperature. And so if you are already too hot, you don't want to keep raising that temperature, because what that means is you're increasing your acidity, which is not healthy. So you want to alkalinize yourself if you're too acidic, but you don't want to alkalinize yourself if you're already too alkaline. So if you're too cold, that's saying that broadly you're already too alkaline, and you don't want to add alkaline to alkaline, because you're going to make yourself colder and colder and colder. So there is such a thing as being too alkaline, even though that's not broadly discussed, but there is such a thing, and it can manifest as your perception of your own temperature, like you're the one that feels cold all the time. So I hope that answered your question. We do have to go to our first commercial break. So we're talking about the Entrepreneur's Guide to Detoxification in 2024, and how knowing your dynamic metabolic type is a critical step for that. We'll be right back.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe. That's MYLAINE RIOBE MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the founder of Awakened Wellness Now, an online education community dedicated to helping exhausted entrepreneurs recover from burnout and live their best lives. She's also a practicing physician at the New York Center for Integrative Health in New York City. For more information, visit awakenedwellnessnow.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
Join Dr. Bernie Siegel on Mind Health Matters every Thursday and Friday, 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern, syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Bernie will draw from his inspirational personal journey, offering us special nuggets of his sacred wisdom weaved through his delightful stories. Listen in as Bernie reminds us to be fully engaged in life.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to Awakened Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and we're talking about how to detox, or if you should detox, in 2024 for entrepreneurs. And so again, knowing your dynamic metabolic type is so critically important because that gives you the roadmap to how you should do just about anything, right? If you're thinking about a specific diet, if you're thinking about doing a cleanse or a detox, if you're thinking about doing coffee enemas, you know, the answer is it depends. And what it depends on is your dynamic metabolic type. And so what I realized after studying Chinese medicine since my daughter was 1, maybe less than 1. Yeah, she's 19 now, just turned 19 on New Year's Day. So, you know, I've had the privilege of studying Chinese medicine for almost 2 decades. It's completely changed my life personally. I believe it's been responsible for keeping my parents optimally healthy, keeping my children optimally healthy. I know that it helped my daughter to avoid surgery when she was 2 years old. And during the pandemic, when I couldn't see patients in my office, which is required for Chinese medicine, you have to see the person in person and do an exam. We call it the four examinations. So we need to observe the person. We need to ask questions, which of course we can do, you know, online. That's not a problem. But to observe someone is a little bit, harder online through a computer screen. But the really critical portions of that exam where you had to look at their tongue and feel their pulses, and not to get like a sense of their heart rate, right? It's not like, oh, your pulse is 68. It's the quality of the pulse. There are 29 different pulse patterns in Chinese medicine. And so you had to feel the person's pulse to figure out like which of those 29 pulse patterns they were demonstrating. And so when the pandemic occurred and we couldn't do that, I had to very quickly try and figure out, well, how can I do this anyway? Like, how am I going to figure this out? And what I realized is you can broadly categorize people into these 6 dynamic metabolic types. And what I realized that was even more exciting is I could teach people how to do this for themselves. And so it was very empowering for me to teach people, like, you can figure out which of these 6 patterns you fall in so that you know how to implement things in your life, your nutrition plan, how you sleep, how much sleep you need, what type of exercises are going to best benefit you, whether or not you should do a cleanse, and if so, how, right? You can answer all those questions for yourself once you know these dynamic metabolic types. And so it was thanks to the fact that I couldn't see people in person that I was able to figure this out. And so it's been very empowering for clients to know this. And one really poignant example of how knowing dynamic metabolic type is so critical, I had a client who came to my office, again, in person, but she had a very simple dynamic metabolic type, which when we showed her how to eat for her dynamic metabolic type, how to sleep, how to move, and how to allow her body to detox itself using her dynamic metabolic type, it transformed her life. I remember she walked into my office. I'm not going to say her real name. We'll call her Jane, right? She walked into my office and she barely had her eyes open. Like, I don't even know how she knew, like, how she was getting around, but she was squinting and just tears streaming down her face. And I remember the receptionist in the office where I was literally came back to get me. And they told me that this woman looked like she was in distress. And when I walked out, she was just having a really bad migraine. And she was in tears. She was crying from the pain. And so I escorted her back to the office, and she proceeded to tell me, like, this was how all her days were and had been for months and months and months. And the only way she felt better is if she were to lay down, close her eyes, and do nothing, right? And that was the only way she felt better. And so that's what she had been doing. And every time she had to open her eyes, get up, and mobilize herself, immediately she got a migraine. And then she was basically not able to function for most of her day. Now, she had her grandson to babysit. She had, her husband wasn't there oftentimes. He was traveling a lot for work. And so she was often by herself. She was often caring for her grandson, and she was just terrified that she was not going to be able to do that. And so she had a really simple dynamic metabolic type. So the first clue was, she told me I have to close my eyes, lay down, and do nothing not to get a migraine, right? And she was also exhausted, right? So she was burnt out. And it was manifesting in the form of these migraines and this exhaustion. The first clue was she felt better when she didn't move, right? So that's one of the 5 questions. Do you feel better or worse when you sit still, right? She felt better when she sat still. So that told me immediately she was a deficient dynamic metabolic type. Before I ever even felt her pulse or did anything or asked her any other questions, I already knew she was deficient, right? And then we figured out she was cold all the time. And in fact, her temperature was 97 degrees all the time, right? So that told me immediately she was a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type. And so we helped her to understand, like, what that meant. And so because she felt so poorly, she was in the habit of eating a lot of junk food just to try and force herself to keep going. And what she didn't realize that was doing is, of course, that was creating inflammation and toxicity in her body, but not because the foods were too toxic and inflammatory, but because she was too depleted, right? So it's not that the processed foods were not inflammatory. It's that it was much more critical for us to understand that the problem, the migraine, the fatigue, the issues she was having were because she was too depleted. Had she been eating the processed food in a normal metabolic state, she wouldn't have gotten migraines. She also was 25 pounds overweight, and she wanted to lose weight, right? So she wouldn't have been overweight as much if she had a normal metabolism eating the processed food. It's because she had a very low metabolism and it was cold that eating that processed food made her even worse. And so it took her a while because she was really, she was just overwhelmed. She was by herself all the time. And she was caring for her grandson on top of that, right? And so it took a while, but within 6 weeks, she had no more migraines. She had lost 25 pounds, and she was feeling better than she had felt in decades. It was all because we warmed her up. So we asked her to eat foods that were going to raise her metabolism by warming her up. So a little bit more spicy food, small frequent meals. Like, she would skip meals because she was literally too tired to eat. So we forced her to eat small frequent meals, and make sure that they were warming. Everything had to be cooked. Everything had to be a little spicy. You had to eat every 3 hours because you have to get yourself out of this low metabolic state, and it has to be things that will warm you up. And so what happened was her own body literally started to detox her as soon as she had the right stuff in there for it to start doing it. It did it without us ever having to do a cleanse or a detox with her. Like, her body just did it on its own once we filled in all the gaps. And so that's just a quick example of how knowing your dynamic metabolic type can literally, like, transform your life. And so, she's been migraine free. She's kept her weight normal. She's been able to do the things that she loves to do, all because she understood, like, How do I eat for my dynamic metabolic type? How do I exercise for it? How do I sleep for it? How do I allow my body to cleanse itself out because I'm a deficient, cold, dynamic metabolic type? So let's go to the next question. My girlfriend says she uses coffee enemas. Weirdo, or onto something? I hope she doesn't watch this show, or you're going to have some splaining to do later. But it depends, right? So when we think, what's a coffee enema, right? What is it? We're putting, things in the rectum with the anticipation of draining things out of it, right? To get things out that don't belong in there. And what is coffee, right? Coffee is acidic, and it's a major antioxidant, and it's a cathartic, right? So what does a cathartic mean? A cathartic, by its definition, means it's draining you out, right? So when we look at what's a coffee enema, it's a draining, detoxing procedure, right? And coffee is hot because it's acidic. And so a coffee enema would best benefit someone that has a cold, excess dynamic metabolic type. Why? Because the coffee is hot, because it's acidic, not because we're drinking hot coffee, right? So drinking iced coffee doesn't make it not acidic. It's still acidic, right? By its nature, it's made of acid. And so coffee is acidic. It's warming. So if you're too cold, coffee is going to warm you up. So it's going to balance you. And if you're excess, coffee is going to drain you out, right? The enema also, having it in the form of an enema is even more draining, right? And so it's going to most benefit someone who is a cold, excess dynamic metabolic type. It's going to least benefit someone who is a hot deficient dynamic metabolic type, right? Because you're adding hot to hot, you're going to make yourself worse. And because you're draining out a deficiency state, you're going to make that deficiency state worse. So if your girlfriend does our burnout assessment, she can see what category she's falling into, and then she can see if the coffee enemas are beneficial to her or not. So that's a great question. So we have our next commercial break to go to. So we have, I think, 3 more questions to go. So you're listening to Awaken Wellness Now. When we come back, we'll tackle these 3 and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe. That's MYLAINE RIOBE MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the founder of Awakened Wellness Now, an online education community dedicated to helping exhausted entrepreneurs recover from burnout and live their best lives. She's also a practicing physician at the New York Center for Integrative Health in New York City. For more information, visit awakenedwellnessnow.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
EDICIA is a U.S. nonprofit dedicated to the dream of ending childhood malnutrition for millions of children around the world. Through the manufacture of Plumpy Nut and other nutrient-rich, peanut-based, ready-to-use foods, EDICIA has already delivered life and hope to nearly 1 million children in over 26 developing countries. To find out how you can join EDICIA's dream of ending childhood malnutrition, please visit ediciaglobal.org.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe Canavas, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Burke. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com. This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to Awakened Wellness. I am your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and today we are talking about the best detoxification strategies for entrepreneurs in 2024 and how knowing your dynamic metabolic type is a critical and necessary step to knowing exactly how to keep your body squeaky clean on the inside. And so, next question, red bottled water has microplastics, wondering if this is a concern. Yes, always a concern for us and the environment, right? The less we use bottled water, the less bottled water they'll make, right? And so what can you do? What I usually do is I filter my water beyond, so I avoid bottled water. I prefer to have my own filtration system. In addition to the reverse osmosis one, I also use a living water filter, which the water then gets filtered through like clay and crystals, and it is restored to its natural state of what we call living water, which is phase 4 water. So that would further reduce the contaminants in your water, and then it also kind of recycles it, we'll call it. And so living water, I think, is very helpful. So even if you have to buy bottled water, I would see if there was a way that you could then get a filtration system. So I get it. It's a thermos. Yeah, I'm sorry, not a thermos. What do you call it? It's a bottle, and I pour the water through, and there's a filter that you buy, and it just filters the water. And then I drink that water. So that might help you. But Kanga water is a name. It's not the one I have, but that's one that some people have heard of before. But Kanga water is another way that you might have heard of it. Next comment. I'm always hot. I appreciate your insights. Thanks. Yeah. So if you're always hot, that means loosely that you're too acidic, right? And so an alkaline diet would be very beneficial for that, right? Until you're neutral, right? So we call the dynamic metabolic types dynamic on purpose, and that's because they will change. So a dynamic metabolic type is a state that your body is in at that time because it's struggling to get something done. And so when we employ the tactics for that dynamic metabolic type, what we're trying to do is resolve it, right? We're trying to balance it back out. Once it's balanced, you're going to be more neutral in how you approach things. So if you're too hot and now you're on an alkaline diet, or maybe you do a vegan diet, right? And now you're back to feeling neutral. You don't want to continue to do that vegan diet and that alkaline diet, because then you're going to get too cold, right? So I always tell people, you want to get back on top of the mountain and then stay there. Because if you keep doing the restrictive thing that you're doing to correct it, you're going to go down the other side, and you're going to be in some other dynamic metabolic type that you don't want to be in, right? And so once you're back to balance, then you want to neutralize everything. And we teach people how to do that in our Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program. It's a way that we teach you from A to Z how to live your best life and how to have optimal health, to beat burnout, and to have business success, life success. So it's for entrepreneurs, who are feeling exhausted and burnt out. So we talk about everything A to Z. We talk about the personalization of the 4 pillars of wellness: eat, move, sleep, and detox, and how to apply your dynamic metabolic type to all of these things so you have the personalized, perfect strategy for you to beat burnout. So I'm glad that helps you. Next comment, love that story. Yeah, I mean, it really, I was in distress when I saw her. Like, it was really disturbing that she had been living her life like that for months and months and months. And she had been to, I can't remember how many neurologists, but it was more than 2. She had been to her regular doctor. She had attempted everything. She'd had all kinds of radiological studies, had taken every medication known to man. Nothing was touching her migraines. The reason that medications weren't working for her is because she was too depleted to use them. Medications are draining by their nature, right? And because they're forcing the body to perform specific reactions in the attempt of masking a symptom. So migraine medication is attempting to block the symptom of pain by forcing the body to engage in a specific reaction, a specific chemical reaction that requires energy, and she didn't have it. And so that's why no matter what migraine medication she attempted, none of them worked. And so she had to know her dynamic metabolic type to figure that out. We had to rebuild her from like the bottom. It was like the Bionic Woman project, right? But she did it, right? She was so motivated because she was so frustrated that she did it. And so it's a great story. It didn't start well, but thank God it ended well. Is this information on dynamic metabolic types on a website? Yes. So it's on our website, awakenedwellnessnow.com. If you go to the upper left, you'll see the menu bar. If it's on the phone, I think it's on the upper right with the little 3 bars. But it's the burnout assessment. And if you want to book a call with us, I also have a 45-minute training on there where we talk about all the different dynamic metabolic types. I give you examples, just like the story I just relayed to you here, where you can start to employ the dynamic metabolic type idea into your 4 pillars of wellness to personalize them. So we have a free training on our website, and we also have the burnout assessment. You can also book a call to speak with us. Just click on the Watch the Training button, and then you can book a call with me. You'll talk to me. And if you've already done your burnout assessment, we could talk about maybe where you're stuck or where you have some questions. And so it's a really good opportunity to jumpstart 2024 for you. Greetings from your Florida listeners. Just wanted to tell you thank you. Thank you. My old man and I are in a much better place due to your health improving teachings. We're even riding bicycles around the park. That's awesome. We're off the couch and living life. Beautiful. So in Florida, I would tell you to have a strategy ready for the summer, because in the summer, you may not be as willing to ride your bikes around the park because it just gets oppressively hot in Florida. So have another alternative strategy to employ, right? Unless you live like way up in northern Florida, where it doesn't get as ridiculously hot as it does in South Florida. I always tell people prepare, because the day you walk out to go do your bike ride and it's too hot and you don't have a plan B, you're going to kind of go back to hanging out on the couch in front of the air conditioner. So I would recommend that you have a plan B ready to go when it's ridiculously hot. Same thing here, right? If up in New York or anywhere north of here, if you're used to doing things out in the summer when it's really nice and, you can run out and go jogging and do all the things. And then when it's like, 1,000 degrees below zero, you got to have a plan B, right? What do I do if it's too cold to go outside, right? Do I have a gym to go to? Do I go like walk in the mall? Like, what do I do? Do I go to a class? Like, you have to have a strategy like ready to go. Like, there has to be a plan B. Because if you get caught off guard, then your brain's like, told you shouldn't have been doing that thing, right? And then now you go back to, not really being as motivated. So I would say, think about where you live, think about what you like to do, know your dynamic metabolic type so that if that thing you're thinking about doing is going to work for you or against you, right? And so that's really important to know. And so, again, knowing your dynamic metabolic type and knowing how to personalize your 4 pillars of wellness. The 4 pillars of wellness are the 4 most critical things we do each and every day to maintain our health, right? So if you're an exhausted entrepreneur, if you're tired, burnt out, those 4 pillars, you have to know how to work them into your day, right? You have to understand the importance of nutrition. And we all understand the importance of nutrition. So really what I'm trying to say, you have to know how to employ the strategy of nutrition into your life, right? If you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you have to know, okay, I need to eat small, frequent meals. I can't fast because it's going to make me actually worse, right? So these are the things to start to employ. So when you think about eating, you have to know, well, how much food do I need? How often should I eat? What should I eat? Should it be cooked? Should it be raw? These are all the things your dynamic metabolic type helps you to know, right? Same thing with movement, right? Exercise, like, what type of exercise is good for me? What type is going to make me worse? If you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, exercises that are overly draining are going to make you worse. So high intensity interval training is going to make you worse if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, regardless if you're cold, hot, or temperature neutral. If you are doing boot camps, you're going to get worse, right? So you want to do restorative things if you're deficient. What's restorative? It's like yin yoga. It's Tai Chi. It's maybe Pilates or some moderate strength training. Those things are restorative because they're not draining you out completely, right? If you are excess, then yes, high intensity interval training will be your best friend. Boot camps will be your best friend. Spin class, best friend, right? Until you get back to neutral. Once you get back to neutral, you have to know what to do then to keep yourself neutral. Because if you keep doing the same thing, and that's why dynamic metabolic types change, right? So it's evergreen. It's something you can always use. So you want to do the burnout assessment a few times a year to know, like, did I switch dynamic metabolic types or am I neutral? And the strategy and how you employ the 4 pillars of wellness are determined by what's my dynamic metabolic type, or am I neutral? Am I totally balanced? If I'm totally balanced, I still have to eat, move, sleep, and detox, but the way that I do it is going to be a little bit different, right? And so that's what we teach in the Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program. So I would love for you to book a call with us and for us to help us know how we can help you live your best life and get your business off the ground, optimized. And again, health is wealth, and nothing's more important than how we feel and how our bodies are operating in the world, because that's how you can be your best in the world. And so I hope today's show was helpful to you. Thank you so much for all the questions, the comments, and until next time, I send you many, many blessings. Thank you.
Join us next time on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, to learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness. Awakened Wellness airs every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern of each month. Meanwhile, you can join our Facebook page at facebook.com/Dr. Mylaine and let us know what you'd like to discuss on future episodes. Dr. Mylaine is the founder of Awakened Wellness Now, an online education community dedicated to helping exhausted entrepreneurs recover from burnout and live their best lives. She's also a practicing physician at the New York Center for Integrative Health in New York City. For more information, visit awakenedwellnessnow.com. This show is part of the Dream Vision 7 Radio Network.